How's it going, everybody, and welcome back to World End Economica Episode 1. Now, this is going to be a bit different. This is the first recording I am doing in a different house. Temporarily, I have moved out of my home with my parents, and I've moved slightly closer to my place of employment. And I've got a little bit of a trial period happening right now for where I'm currently at. And yeah, I'm in this, I'm living. I'm moved out. I'm in this new spot, and it feels pretty good. I'm happy to be here. I'm just going to speak a little bit quieter than I usually would because I don't know how loud my voice really is and how much it will go across, like, through walls, if anything. I do have neighbors, so I'm going to speak a little bit differently. Actually, I'm going to quickly turn off the light and turn on the air conditioner because it is hot right here in Australia. Annoyingly as well, actually I better lock the doors. I should be fine. Annoyingly as well, during transport, one of my desktop screens got slightly damaged, and now is just a small quarter of it is not working. So that sucks, but it is what it is. I'll live with it. But yeah, and while I'm here, of course, just a reminder to everybody to check the link in the description and pick up a copy of my book, The Protector, Volume 1. It is available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook. Comes out January 10th, 2025. Check the link for places where you can buy it. Alright, this is going to be a different sort of recording. After the last episode as well, I'm expecting conflict, but we'll see. Alright. Due to what happened with Hagana, and also not being able to find a good investment technique, I stared blankly at the trading on the investment contest's virtual market. I wasn't really trading, but while looking at the movement of stocks, I was checking out what would happen if I bought a certain stock here or there. The result was a feeling that it could both go well and not go well. However, I kind of knew the cause of all this. It was definitely Hagana. However, it wasn't about whether Hagana hated me or misunderstood me. What Hagana said started to stab at me bit by bit. We are doing all that we can to survive. We are different from someone like you, who was born on the moon. The people from the town I lived in came from the troubled paths of the earth. For someone like me born on the moon, I had yet to know how terrible the moon could be. However, the people who came from Earth knew enough about its ills, and also those of the moon. Having those words thrust at me like that, there was nothing I could say in response. Nothing in response to being called a spoiled brat with his head in the clouds. Well, it was true that I left home because of a dream even I thought ridiculous. Furthermore, trading had recently not gone too well, and I felt I was at a standstill, lost. However, that didn't mean that I wasn't trying my best at life. Realizing that I was making such excuses, I noticed that apparently I felt morally inferior to Earth folks, even more so than I had imagined. They were folks with dirt on their feet who worked hard to get to the moon. They abandoned their hometowns and came to a new frontier. Otherwise, they would have been dragged along by the unreasonable systems in place in the world. When it came to understanding the harshness of reality, it hadn't really had the same experience. I hadn't really had the same experiences Hagana had. I wasn't an adult like Lisa either. Even though I had managed to earn 70,000 moves, It wasn't like any hard-working person couldn't save that up, and it certainly wasn't enough to live on for the rest of one's life. Rather, if my trading hadn't gone well, I would have been a classic moon-bred loser with no education, no money, and no idea of the hardships of Earth. I suddenly lost confidence in what I had been doing when Hagana told me those things straight to my face. Perhaps something was wrong with me, since I had pondered this simplistic plan of collaborating with the math whiz Hagana just because things hadn't been going well. If good things happened just like that, then no one in the world would suffer. Since my trading had originally gone pretty well, perhaps I thought the world was a pretty easygoing place, and I was the only one who realized it. A pampered kid who knew nothing about the world. I then realized that, as unbearable as it was, I had to live with that moniker. Hey look, the man's coming to some realizations. It's a good thing. I couldn't focus on trading the stocks in the investment contest, as it seemed that something was clouding my thoughts. I felt worry, hesitation, and anguish as I stretched out on the ground. And then my mind hit upon one thing, and that was when I was summoned to Lisa's room, and the sensation I felt from her hug. Lisa was a kind and wise adult. What would happen if I sought advice from Lisa? Would she show me the right thing to say? I was honestly thinking about something this pitiful. I was wondering where that brutish motivation had gone. The motivation I had right after I left home. Perhaps I was just naive about how society works. Perhaps I didn't have grandiose dreams to go where no one had gone before, and to be the only one to rise where no one had gone before, and leave my footprint there. I kind of realized that I was about ready to tear up. Even though I knew thinking about it only made things worse, I could not stop. This is why, if I didn't hear a strange sound from afar just then, I might have drowned in a vortex of my own insecurity. I opened my eyes and looked towards the door, and after a brief moment I could hear that sound again. The ding-dong sound was akin to wood being struck. It was then that I realized someone was at the door. However, despite that fact, I decided to continue to lie down and sleep on the floor. The sound came a third time after a brief pause. Somehow or another, I had a sense that it was sounding more impatient. Speaking of visitors, Chris came by last time. It seemed that she was delivering things for the family business during the lunch break from school without stopping to eat. If it was Chris at the door, it would be a shame for her to waste her time. At that moment, the intercom chimed, and I stood up and headed out of the room, figuring that Hagana was not going to come out. The intercom chimed 4 times, and then a 5th time. If it was Chris, it was possible that she really needed to use the bathroom. Thinking about that, I opened the door to the church after rubbing my eyes, just in case. At that instant, I felt it was plain good luck that I didn't instinctively send my fist flying out. Is Lisa in? The sound of the intercom chiming a 5th time almost sounded resentful for the long wait as I came upon the gloomy face of the door. It was Toyama, the moneylender. However, the intensity of that gloominess was lost, most likely due to his obvious fatigue. What do you want? Lisa is in today, right? Toyama didn't respond to my question, so I asked his once more. I got annoyed instantly, but I did realize that it was probably just a mere outburst of anger. She ain't in. She isn't in. She said something about going to the university and took off. Helping out with a lecture then. Toyama understood at once and nodded. It seemed that he knew more about Lisa than I did. I see, but if she's helping with classes at the university, then she should be returning soon. Would you mind if I waited for her? As he said that, he tried to slip past me and head into the church, but I grabbed his shoulder reflexively. The difference in strength was clear. I thought that Toyama would recoil from this, but he just turned, looked at me, and spoke in a seemingly sad tone. It's important. Before I knew it, I had let go of Toyama's shoulder. There was an unknown intensity, one a child might not have perceived, maybe, but it was definitely there. Most appreciated. On top of that, he bowed his head lightly. I said nothing else and just mumbled to myself. May I come in? After hearing the circumstances, I could only let him through. But... Hagana is in an unbelievably bad mood. I said that with my complete seriousness, to which Toyama smiled wearily. For a brief moment his shoulders swayed as he smiled silently and coughed as he sighed. I will be careful. However, kid, you know how things are supposed to work in this world, right? Perhaps he wanted to ask me to protect him if Hagana started calling him names again. I felt it was only fair, but I'd be so happy if I got acknowledged for that. It was just like Lisa said. I hid my embarrassment and turned away. You may come in. Pardon my intrusion. I let Toyama inside the church and closed the door. Toyama removed his hat and bowed his head a bit in front of a crucified, bearded man located straight across from the entrance. Was the matter so important that he had to pray to God? I thought about that as I led Toyama in. We're getting evicted, I bet. I brought the old guy some coffee and intended to seclude myself in my room, but I realized that it was not the right thing to do, and as a compromise I brought my computer out to the living room. Toyama sat on the sofa by the coffee table while I sat at the dining table, which still had a couple sandwiches left on the plate. I tapped away at my computer. Even though I couldn't really concentrate, I could take a look at what kind of stocks were in this virtual market. In any case, while glancing at the popular stocks, I started developing a hunch that these stocks were not fully fictitious and were actually based on real stocks, in line with rumors circulating on the net. Are you playing some sort of game? Toyama asked me as he poked his nose in on what I was doing. Something like that? I see. He sipped his coffee and appeared uninterested as he looked from afar. He spoke again while in that state. Is it interesting? Don't ask me such strange questions, I thought to myself as I looked up. I guess. I see. What? Oh, nothing. I just thought it was nice that it was interesting. I shrugged my shoulders and returned to the screen. Your days must be difficult. At my words, he craned his neck toward me. However, instead of getting angry, he laughed hoarsely. It isn't so bad, but I guess it's because of this face. People often think that way because of it. He rubbed his chin as he answered. I did something rather unexpected in response. I looked right back at him, wondering if he really could joke around like that. You have a pretty good-looking face, though. It'll probably do you some good in the future. His words of praise were to the point. My chin was lowered as I looked at Toyama, who just laughed quietly. You might have thought I was joking, but I know a thing or two about this. Well, it's not like I'd say you were a pretty boy, but what I said was my first impression. When I gave up trying to figure out whether he was praising me or not, Toyama gave me a low laugh. To put it simply, it's a matter of who is capable and who is incapable. This was one of the few things I'd learned through money lending. With that said, where do you stand? Me? I am, well, you can throw me in the lot of those who are not so capable. He rubbed his chin again as he spoke. Though he wasn't fat, his skin was saggy, and his eyes showed fatigue. When he laughed, I could see some irregular teeth that made me think of a zombie out of a horror flick. Well, stubbornness is a selling point. Most of the time it wouldn't go well, but no matter where, one could find a place to get by. Well, I guess they are like mice. I see. I ended up laughing dryly at how apt his self-description fit. On that point, Lisa's reliable even though she's young. That's something you're born with and not something you can train yourself to do. She's reliable. That was a good description of Lisa. Well, what about Hagana? He piqued my interest, so I tried asking him that. Toyama grimaced upon hearing Hagana's name, thinking back to what happened before, but he nodded in response and answered. As for that girl, I'm not too sure. Well, it is true. I can see that she is clever, but that is about it. Hiding in a shell within oneself is like a young bird who hasn't hatched from its egg. What does that mean? You don't get it, do you? After coming to the moon to lend money, occasionally you run into people like that. In those cases, well, there are many here from Earth who have talent that can be bought. My face froze for a bit, but Toyama just happened to reach out to his cup, wanting to sip some more coffee. I told myself that he couldn't have seen my expression. Money lending is less about the exchange of money and more the exchange of trust. Understand? If asked if I understood, it would be annoying to say that I didn't. But I didn't really understand, so I shook my head, annoyed. Promising, when dealing with someone like me, to be able to precisely answer that you don't understand when you don't is certainly an asset. I was not happy with him, of all people, praising me. That's what I wanted to say, but being complimented did feel nice at least. Anyhow, I've been in this line of work ever since I graduated from college back on Earth. For 20 years I've been determining whether or not to loan out money to people. What I learned was that the financial standing of a lendee was one thing, but the real important matter was their character. Even if someone doesn't have any money, if he's a good person, he will without a doubt return it. On the other hand, if someone is of a bad disposition, then no matter the amount of money, they will not pay it back at all. But there's another type of person you shouldn't loan money to, and that would be people like that girl. Toyama once again sipped on his coffee. For someone loaning money in a less fortunate, run-down area like this, there was some level of emphasis in his words. Toyama was strangely persuasive, as if he'd learned how to be from some unfortunate event in his own life. How'd you say it? She's tenuous, I guess. Tenuous? Exactly. She's not completely removed from reality, but I get the feeling that she isn't firmly planted in it. Up to a certain point, she's just like other people. She would grit her teeth like normal people, be happy like normal people, and get angry like normal people. But Once that point is surpassed, there is only resignation. And because of that, she wouldn't even mind dying. Perhaps she doesn't feel like she has any value. I don't think she really thinks of herself as something precious. Toyawa stopped talking, and a distant look came into his eyes. Perhaps his eyes were reflecting on a life that wasn't so straightforward. If one doesn't even believe in one's own importance, then there's no way one would value the money of others. Things that won't be paid back, and that is that. You do not think about what others think. You don't pay heed to how you are. No matter what happens, everything is viewed through cynical lens. Lending money to people like that is not possible, no matter how talented they are. You've loaned out money to such people before? Yes, I have. While on Earth I was a banker. In order to start a business, many people came to me. There were people like that, people more pathetic than myself, who'd hid a ruinous mindset in their hearts. But they appeared to be excellent candidates. A large amount of money was loaned out. At first, all went well. But at some point or another, they stumbled, and I looked on wondering if they were fine with that. For myself, this is a business where I must have faith in the lendee to lend money. For the person I can trust and loan money to, if a simple failure makes them shrug their shoulders, throw everything away, and then proceed to simply be tired of life and hang themselves, well, I would be equally disappointed. I didn't like this kind of talk. Toyama, who was doing that kind of talking, didn't seem to enjoy it either. That girl gives off this mentality. But she is still young, and it is fortunate that she crossed paths with someone like Lisa. Very lucky. If one's luck is good, then one can break out of the egg. Doing so, they are able to chirp and warble. To be able to raise one's voice like that is one way to endure through life. In that regard, kid, you don't seem like one to be timid, and thus perhaps nothing troubles you either. Toyama seemed to be laughing mockingly at me, which was enough to anger me. But I no longer thought of him as a bad guy, at the very least. An unfortunate person, perhaps, but he didn't seem to be bad. Besides, she still has something to protect, so that girl is indeed lucky. When I came here to collect the interest, she was really quite hostile. That girl, she ran away from home, right? On hearing that suddenly, I couldn't hide my facial expression. Toyama looked at me calmly and shrugged his shoulders a bit. Lisa was the first person who stood up for me, I suppose. It was as if God, or perhaps Buddha, manifested themselves, I suppose. Hey, kid. What? Well, it's understandable for you to seethe with rage and to vilify me, but you must protect a girl like that. People like that aren't bad themselves. It's mostly just the environment they were brought up in. She came from an ashen-colored country where there were boundless crags and needle-sharp conifer tree forests. The winters were long, the summers were short, and the sky would sometimes open into a blue so brilliant you'd believe it was God's work. I couldn't imagine Hagana leading a happy life. Besides, until we went into that clothing store, I felt Hagana was close to me. Even Hagana's strong-armed haggling was the result of her determination, according to Lisa. Nonetheless, I did not know about that, and I had rejected Hagana's sincerity. Furthermore, I had ended up paying off the interest for Lisa, someone Hagana tried in vain to protect. though she might have been grateful. To go any further would put Hagana in an awkward situation. Even though she was angry at me, there was probably nothing she could do. Besides, she's a cute girl, is she not? Well, even her foul mouth and cuteness wouldn't be a match for my daughter. I couldn't tell if that last set of words were a joke or not, but those words made it worth for me to hear him out, and I forced out some laughter through my nose. Well, looks like I was talking a bit long there. There isn't anyone who would take the time to listen to me. Toyama laughed in embarrassment and drank his coffee. I thought his smile looked unreasonably cool. I was about to say that there certainly were people who'd want to listen to him. But the sound of a door further down the hallway opening and closing prevented these words from coming out. Ah, looks like Lisa is back. Toyama said that as he put down his coffee cup. Before long, Lisa was in the living room, and she blinked in surprise as she noticed Toyama. Did I need to make a payment today? No, I just wanted to speak with you today. Do you have some time right now? As he stood up, Toyama hunched over, and he looked shorter compared to Lisa. Indeed, it looked like only a small matter, but since he said it, I could feel that he really did go out of his way in how he acted. Perhaps this was another manifestation of someone with feet planted on solid ground, I thought to myself, and started seeing Toyama as a grown-up in his own way. Oh, no, I don't mind, but Hal, did you do something to offend you? Just as I was thinking about that, Lisa spoke up abruptly. Toyama turned to look at me, just as Lisa was, and he laughed quietly before turning back to Lisa. We had an entertaining conversation. Oh my! Lisa was actually surprised, but I was a bit hurt by her reaction. What exactly did she think I was anyway? But, okay, I understand. So you wanted to talk about the loan then? No, I'm here to talk about how to grow lilies. At Toyama's joke, Lisa laughed and nodded disappointedly. For the lender and the lendee, it seemed that they were tied together as if by fate. In that case, although it's a bit cramped, please come to my room. If that is possible, then I would appreciate it. Toyama followed after Lisa. I watched them go when suddenly Lisa stopped and turned towards me. Hal? What? Keep an eye on Hagana, okay? She had to put it that way, since there was no telling how Hagana would try to help if she found out Toyama was in Lisa's room discussing loan terms. However, given the exchange from earlier, I didn't know whether or not I'd be able to make any guarantees on my surveillance duties. Or that's what I wanted to say, but I realized I couldn't really that. So I just nodded my head half-heartedly. It's possible that perhaps they did show some concern towards me. Before long, Lisa and Toyama ascended the stairs towards the second floor. With me left here, the living room became strangely quiet, so I returned to looking over stocks one by one. My eyes pored over the numbers, but nothing stuck in my head. There were many things I should have thought about, which prevented the limited capacity of my mind to take in any of it. Afterwards, the day became dark, as the program changed to night, and it appeared that Toyama had left. Or so it seemed as Lisa came down the steps by herself. He might have gone out through the door on the third floor to avoid running into Hagana. It appeared that it was a discussion that warranted sufficient preparation, and I could see it in Lisa's facial expression when she returned to the living room. It was the first time I'd seen her with an expressionless look, as she poured herself a cup of water and just looked at it. She seemed so serious that I couldn't really say anything. Lisa downed half the cup in one go and sighed briefly. She wiped her mouth haphazardly. When she raised her downcast face up, she was back to the usual Lisa. Why don't I prepare dinner? But somehow those words sounded tense and tired. I wondered what Toyama's talk was all about. Somehow I didn't think it was a trivial matter of any sort. But even then, Lisa's behavior was kind as if she had never crossed paths with Toyama ever. Lisa was an adult. I believed that firmly. Thus, without asking any other questions, I just nodded my head. Also, it appeared that the computer terminal on top of the sink really was a trick of Lisa's. I wasn't sure whether that was a good thing or not. What I did know was that when I saw Hagana again at dinner, she disregarded me even more than she did in the morning. Also, my feeling of guilt only increased. Investing had run itself into the ground like a rock. There were now many questions. How would these matters be resolved? I wondered as I lay in bed that night. The next day was a day off. The actual markets were closed. The investment contest's virtual markets were likewise closed. Apparently, server maintenance and data aggregation were necessary, and thus I had nothing to do. As for actual trading, I pored over every bit of news in the morning that was of any value or effect. Occasionally, when I looked at the news, it seemed as if something new was happening every day these days. But if you followed the news for at least a week, it was clear that this was not the case. Thus, with nothing better to do, I headed out into the afternoon. It was possible that I'd have a run-in with the law if I loitered around here on a weekday afternoon, and that was enough to keep me a shut-in. But when I was living at home, I would often spend my days outdoors. If I didn't get out and do some exercise from time to time, I'd rot. Besides, I would most likely run into Hagana if I stayed in the church. As for Lisa, after Toyama came by, she unexpectedly had begun to meditate all the time. I packed the computer in my bag and slung it over my shoulder. After tying my shoelaces, I headed up to the 3rd floor and headed out. Today was a clear day, and probably due to the days of rain that washed the atmosphere, I was able to see clearly for a fair distance. The laundry fluttered in part of the 3rd floor yard, while lilies bloomed in the corner. Their numbers diminished because I pulled some out earlier. Though the landscape in front of me seemed so tranquil, I was bothered by the number of problems that had cropped up. When I thought about them, the vastness and closeness of space right outside of the dome increased vague fears in me. I felt completely alone out here. But the more I thought about it, the more I knew it couldn't be solved. I shook my head and took off, kicking off on roofs and walls. I hadn't decided on where to go. Instead, I had decided on what to do. Kunko? When I asked the stout old lady selling piping hot steamed buns out front, she handed one with a pair of tongs to a customer and responded. I don't know whether or not they'd have a store out front or not. I don't know if they'd have a storefront or not, so that was me. Ah, the delivery company, I believe. What did you need with them? I see. Do you know where I should go to meet with them? At 4 moles for one. The minced vegetable and meat bun was a good size and tasty. While having one in lieu of lunch, I asked the old lady at the shop about Chris's whereabouts. Just a minute, let's see now. Since today is Sunday. If you're looking for Chris, she's out on the 3rd block doing a delivery. The answer came from a customer passing by who'd overheard my question. Third block? Yep, over by the tunnel that connects to the fifth outer section. On days off, she's usually over there lazing about. Ah, over there, huh? It was a favorite spot of mine. The old man who gave me that information proceeded to purchase 5 steamed buns. The old lady quickly restocked the steamer with fresh buns. Thanks, I'll be off now. Sure. Old lady, give me a few of the big ones, will ya? I heard the old man jerk around as I turned around, stuffed the bun in my mouth, and prepared to run off. I was stopped by the old lady, who handed the buns to the old man. Ah, wait a moment. In films I'd see, there would always be someone playing the thief who would say something like, "What kind of idiot would stop when told to stop?" Ever since I left home and gotten used to being chased, those words had a strong impact on me. That was why I hesitated for a moment, switching into a stance where I could run away at a moment's notice, and turned around. When I did, the old lady took her tongs and placed a bun in front of me. If you are going to meet with Chris, please hand this to her. That girl, she's a bit too skinny if you ask me. The words of the old lady, whose face was round like her steamed buns, was enough to persuade me. I nodded obediently and took the paper-wrapped, piping-hot bun. I will be sure to give it to her. I'm counting on you. She didn't even ask for money, so there was no reason for me to be suspicious. At the side of the shop was a stray cat napping in the glow of the sun. I certainly didn't dislike this kind of atmosphere on the outside. The pompous denizens of the White Belt, though they lived in a nice area, were certainly not this open. Everyone was suspicious of each other, and the mood showed it. Naturally, the residents of the White Belt, who make up the middle and upper class of society, were always in constant competition with each other in Nugent City, so that was probably to be expected. But if I could become just as dull as them by getting wrapped up in this competition, then I had better exercise caution. As I thought about that, I ran towards the third block as mentioned to me earlier. On the lunar surface, the temperature and humidity level were fairly consistent year-round. I heard it was most similar to spring on Earth. The temperature and weather made for a glorious day, I felt, even to make you perspire when exercising after eating a meal. Jesus, I stumbled over that. After holding myself up in my room for a week, I was ready for some release as I left, hopped and navigated the extreme highs and lows of this town. One reason I enjoyed exercise, outside of the fact that I had learned how useful it was to condition my body, was that I put away distracting thoughts when in motion as I pushed forward. To be able to fly through the air through this town on a nice afternoon was a great, indescribable feeling. I leapt from rooftop to rooftop, and soon I was at a cliff in the third block connecting to the fifth outer section. The only way up was a rough path that ran around the edge. But I had no intention of going that way, so I ran like a cat up the side of the wall. Due to the low gravity, there were traffic signs by the cliffs for the sake of others who did the same thing. I used the sign as a stepping stone to take one more flying leap. Just at that moment, an old lady on an electric scooter came out of the tunnel of the direction of the fifth outer section, and seeing me jump up off the bottom of the cliff did startle her a bit. As for me, I thought nothing of it. Once I reached the road, I looked towards the sixth outer section. They said that she was in this area making a delivery, but I couldn't see her from up here. Just as I thought about that while I stared out into the distance, I heard a voice above and behind me. Ah! I turned around towards that familiar voice, and sitting on top of the tunnel was Chris. Next to her was a large bag, and in her hands was a beat-up terminal of hers she'd carry around. Thinking that I was pretty lucky to find her this quickly, I grabbed the bun that the old lady gave me and chucked it at Chris without saying a word. What? It's from the old lady at the steamed bun shop. Told you to eat up. Oh, I see. While Chris looked at the wrapped up package in confusion, she swallowed the saliva in her mouth. Just as I always did, I leapt towards the tree on the side of the road. Then, using that as a foothold, I did a 3-point jump and leapt to the top of the tunnel. Chris peeled away the paper timidly and didn't seem at all surprised as I leapt up to her. Perhaps Chris also moved like I did when she made her deliveries. That's nice. I didn't get any chance to see the full thing, because usually when the few seconds the dialogue box takes to come into view, that's when I slow the video and take a screenshot for my thumbnails, but that didn't give me the chance. Oh well. What are you doing here? I asked my question just as Chris bit into the bun. Due to the timing, Chris became flustered, a large chunk of the bun in her mouth. Oh, sorry, no need to be in a panic. No, sorry, that's me. That's Hal. Oh, sorry, no need to be in a panic. Chris nodded dutifully, and after munching for a bit, she gulped with satisfaction. So, what are you doing here? I asked her once more, and Chris poured something out of her canteen into a cup before answering. I'm studying. But isn't it Sunday? Yes. I was just intending to make small talk, but somehow Chris took that to mean that she was somehow in the wrong and looked downcast. I was a bit surprised as I continued. No, well, there's nothing wrong with that, I think. You're studying math, right? Yes. That's pretty cool. Huh? When it comes to studying, I always felt it was something you did in a darkened room, just grinding away, but to see you study in a relaxed manner is, well, pretty cool. Study out here in a relaxed manner. That was not entirely a lie. Lisa had once told me about a great artist or something who would seek out good places to isolate themselves in order to think through an important problem. But what I saw in front of me was entirely different from what I imagined. There was a large bag next to her, which made it seem as if she was just taking a break on the way to a delivery. It looked like she was using it as a cushion. In her hands was a canteen. While taking occasional sips from the steaming or warm-looking tea in her cup, she seemed to be deep in thought as she looked at the beautiful scenery in front of her. This relaxing atmosphere was perfectly fitting for a calm girl like Chris, I realized. What? However, it seemed that Chris wasn't used to being praised like that. She looked away rather anxiously before becoming downcast again. But even then, it was easy to see from her reddened face that she didn't exactly hate that either. In any case, your bun is going to get cold. When I said that, she took a fleeting glimpse at the steaming bun, then looked at me again before looking back down. She then timidly started eating the bun. She was just like a small creature, and I had to hold back from keep from teasing her. I knew that Chris felt somewhat awkward as I stood up and gazed out at the scenery from the top of the tunnel. However, it appeared that Chris had finally gotten over her timidness, and she bravely stuffed her cheeks with the bun. I saw a good opening at that moment to break the ice. Hey, there's something I want to ask you. Her obedient reply contrasted sharply with the fact that she was talking with her mouth full. Her lips had some bits of minced meat on them, and she wiped her mouth hurriedly when I pointed it out. You're friendly with Hagana, right? Our family's cat, even when examined by the mass observation equipment on the orbital elevator, was probably just a stray that survived hitching a ride to the moon despite decompression and low temperatures. But when you splashed this water with face, it looked at you like she was looking at me now. But our cat could leap at me angrily when it came to its senses. Chris looked at me with upturned eyes, seemingly asking me if I was angry with her. So, there's something I wanted to ask. Since I had been standing while Chris had been sitting, I was physically looking down at her, and I averted my eyes for the first time. Though I realized that this was kind of pitiful, I guess I really was feeling awkward about asking a question like that. Do you happen to know what Hagana likes? I tried to figure out the quickest way to resolve the unfathomable situation eating away at me, and this was my solution. She started to talk, but apparently then she realized that she still had a bit of bun in her mouth. She closed her eyes in confusion before chewing and swallowing the rest of it, in sudden relief before rephrasing what she was going to say. You're talking about Miss Hagana? Yeah, you look like you come to the church often, so do you know anything? Chris looked dumbfounded as she looked up at me, looking at me with innocent eyes as though wondering what I was trying to say. I was still feeling awkward and didn't look back at Chris, so in her Chris-like way, she must have thought that she had some strange misunderstanding of the situation, as her cheeks suddenly turned red and she clasped her hands together. For Miss Hagana? Don't get the wrong idea here. I brought my face closer in a threatening manner. Chris closed her eyes quickly and brought her hands up over her head in a defense as she curled up. But of course I wasn't going to hit her. I sat her up, and she opened one eye and looked up at me cautiously. Well, because of a simple mistake, I did something bad to Hagana. Something bad? A lot happened. I had a sour expression as I said it, which caused Chris to avert her eyes somewhat as she spoke timidly. So, well, it's something to give to her by way of an apology, right? In the simplest sense, yes. Oh. As Chris said that, her expression changed. She had a distant look on her face, as if she was thinking about something. But perhaps she unusually came here to think about math problems. It was more extreme. Just a quick glimpse at her made it hard to tell if she was a guy or a girl. Looking at her like that, though, I somehow had this feeling that someday she'd grow up to be a very beautiful woman. With the sound of a small motor, a single-passenger electric bike left the tunnel. That was when Chris looked at me and spoke. You're a good person, aren't you? Huh? My response might have been unintentionally strong, but Chris fell back suddenly, and I could hear her start to giggle and laugh. It doesn't matter whether I'm a good guy or a bad guy, so do you have any ideas or not? Yes, things Miss Hagana likes, right? She said this obediently and with some hesitation. Something this annoying was definitely a very girlish trait. I must definitely be bad when it comes to girls. No matter the situation, I hated how I felt like a kid when there was a girl in front of me. She doesn't really say much about this sort of stuff. Anything works. Anything that she might have an interest in, perhaps. Something that she has an interest in. She seemed to have a frank personality. Perhaps this kind of talk didn't happen often. But as I waited patiently as Chris pondered this matter, Chris looked up suddenly and said something. Ah! You thought of something? No, well... What? At my question, Chris pointed towards the front of the road at the bottom of the tunnel, and then spoke. There's Miss Hagana. I looked out in front of me, and it did appear that Hagana was on the path heading our way. Thanks to the slope of the hill, and it did not appear that she knew that I was here. I was panicked as I realized that things would be bad if she saw me here. Keep quiet about me coming here. After I said that to Chris, I turned toward the cliffs and behind me and leapt into the thicket of the trees there. Chris followed me with her eyes as I went, but before long she could hear Hagana calling out to her, and she turned around in a panic. However, Hagana wasn't about to ascend to the top of the tunnel, so Chris gathered up her things, headed down, and disappeared from sight. Hagana's timing was rather annoying, but it was just a matter of finding another opportunity to talk to Chris. It was also possible that she was sharper than I took her for, and would discreetly try to get Hagana to tell her about her interests. I held onto that hope as I hid myself within the space between the unnaturally planted giant trees. But I couldn't stop wondering how Hagana had happened upon this place all of a sudden. There was no way that she could have come looking for me, so perhaps Hagana needed to talk to Chris. Perhaps it was about her studies. That's what I thought, but remembering how Hagana looked as she walked down that path, I wondered if there was not something else on her mind. It's not that I wouldn't be able to eavesdrop on them if I tried, but there would be no way to talk my way out of it if I were to be discovered. So I meekly took a detour and headed back to the church. Alright, I think that is where I'm going to end it, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry for the short stint of like 10-minute shorter episodes between this one and Fairy Deer, but don't have a lot of time at the moment. It's actually rather late. I have work tomorrow, so I'm going to leave things here. Don't forget to check out the link in the description and buy a copy of my book or pre-order it. I would greatly appreciate either or. And yeah, make sure you all have a good one, guys, and I'll see you next time.